always been the least paid person on payroll at every institution I have worked in. And it's not
Even in the White House?
Even in the White House.
Well, whose fault is that?
Up next, we're going to discuss a really interesting segment from CNN featuring a Democratic strategist and their conservative guest, Scott Jennings, actually the same show I was on just earlier this week, where they discussed DEI. And the Democratic strategist made an admission that seems to tacitly imply that the Democratic Party is deeply racist against Black women like her. Take a listen to this really fascinating clip that's going viral.
Because, yes, the president gets to pick whoever he wants, and the Senate is now for the Republicans, and I would have hoped that some of them would have been had more profiles and courage, but they didn't, and they actually put people in that I do believe in your party you have more qualified people who could be in that cabinet. I'd like to think that. But that's not what they chose.
Secretary of Defense.
That's not what they chose. So go for it, okay? I think the issue in this country right now is we live in different realities.
That's right.
I live in a reality where I know I do not have the same opportunity as you. I know I don't.
And you know
and
that
I know
too.
what, Scott?
And you know that.
Let me just tell you about me.
I'm gonna let you finish, but I want to answer this.
I'm not talking about how you feel. I'm talking about how I feel. Me, a Black woman in this country.
But not in this city.
And I will run. And if you want
Look,
me
I'm a New Yorker, not in this city. You cannot
the
say
facts.
that. You can't say that in this city. I'm
not talking about New York. I'm talking about Ashley.
Let her finish.
Okay,
Let her finish.
I got a law degree, a master's, and 2 bachelors. Probably more education than all of y'all added up together at this table,
Fine
right?
by me.
And I have always been the least paid person on payroll at every institution I have worked in. And it's not
Even
because...
in the White House?
Even in the White House.
Well, whose fault is that? I don't think you worked for George W. or Trump.
Well, guess what happened when I was there? DEI.
So does Ashley realize that she just called her own party, her own side of the political spectrum, racist? I mean, she worked in the Obama White House and for progressive groups and nonprofits, and now for CNN. And she said, including later in the segment as well, that she, despite all her degrees and her education, has always been the lowest paid. So you're saying that the places you work for that are supposedly like woke and progressive engaged in racist and sexist pay discrimination against you, which is illegal, by the way, and paid you less than your equivalent counterparts, even though you're more qualified than them, according to you. And I guess, obviously, we don't know if it's true or not, but if we take her at her own word, how is that anything other than a stunning indictment of your own side of the spectrum as utter and total frauds? Democrats claim to be the party of diversity and of feminism, but according to you, they paid you less than you deserve, less than your equivalent counterparts because of your race and gender. That would be really bad. That would be a big deal if that's true. And it would be hilariously hypocritical. But, and this is the part of the conversation that I think that Ashley and some of the other Democratic panelists got wrong or missed, it actually still doesn't justify the excesses of the DEI movement that are essentially forms of reverse discrimination that people are upset about and trying to unwind or roll back. Because the whole segment here was framed around the DEI and the pushback it's getting. And I think, they have some points that Republicans are going too far and kind of crying DEI about everything as an explanation for everything. The LA wildfires, the plane crashes, things that are very complicated and have lots of causes that are not necessarily tied directly to DEI. But there's a grain of truth to these criticisms. The FAA did engage in an artificial diversity campaign that excluded qualified candidates. Firefighting departments have lowered standards to boost gender equity. There is a real problem here that people are identifying, even if they're being overzealous and throwing it around as a new buzzword. And the existence of racism, discrimination against Black people, against women, doesn't actually justify those kinds of overcorrecting policies or reverse discrimination policies, which seem to be the implication from some of the pushback that Scott Jennings got on this panel. The other people would say to him, well, we still don't have a meritocracy. We don't have equal opportunity for everyone. Black people still face discrimination. Women still face challenges. And so we need DEI to level out the playing field. And guys, remember, we've talked about DEI. We've reported on it. It includes literally these institutions explicitly hiring people because of their race and not hiring people of certain races at universities. It includes literal different standards for college applicants in terms of test scores and grades based on their ethnicity and race. It includes lowering standards in life and death fields so that you can have more diverse representation in the workforce. They argue in this panel that the fact that we don't have perfect meritocracy, we don't have a perfectly equal playing field, people still face obstacles and discrimination, means that we can't have a neutral approach that just hires the most qualified people. We have to have this reverse balancing of the scales. But I think that's wrong. I think nobody, at least I certainly don't, claim that everything is perfect and fair and equal in America in 2025, though I think we've made tremendous progress. And we are one of the most diverse and multicultural countries in the world to still offer profound opportunities to all people. But I, of course, don't think it's perfect. And I, of course, acknowledge there are still barriers and hurdles. But the key contention that I have where I disagree with these kinds of liberal commentators is that I want to take us closer and constantly strive towards more equality of opportunity, towards more meritocracy. Like that should be the goal we're driving towards. Whereas they're willing to just rip that up and just try to balance out the scales or jerry-rig outcomes with reverse discrimination through DEI excesses and that whole movement, which to me not only is just immoral in its own right, also has the perverse effect of reinforcing the divides between groups and re-inflaming these tensions and these clashes between identity groups. And I want those things ultimately to blend into the background. I want the difference between Black and white Americans to be not super relevant. Whereas if you put all this emphasis on them and start treating people differently on the basis of these characteristics in the name of progress to get more fair outcomes or more equitable outcomes, really, not necessarily more fair, you actually reinforce those divides between people. Anyway, I thought this segment was interesting and kind of funny, not just because of the accidental own goal on the Democratic Party, but also because of the way the two sides, and this is the one point Ashley did make that is correct, the way the two sides talked past each other. We don't live in the same reality. When we talk about DEI on the right and we're critical of it, people on the left and in liberal circles or Democrats, they seem to, at least some of them, not understand what we do and don't mean. We're not trying to rip up the Americans with Disabilities Act. We're not trying to bring back segregation like some of these TikTokers say or anything like that. We just want meritocracy and equality of opportunity. And yes, we still want to strive towards that, even in a world that is not fundamentally fair. They talked on the panel about like, well, you know, the world's a boys' club. People get jobs because of who their dad golfs with and all this. And I don't disagree. Like, that's a valid point to make. But my point is we should also get rid of that. It reminds me of the debate over affirmative action where they're like, well, you oppose affirmative action for races, but there's legacy admissions where people get in just because of who their dad is. And I'm like, yes. And the answer is to get rid of both, not to keep one, because there's also other unfair things in society. But I feel like that's the talking point that they ultimately retreat to and why there's such a profound disconnect on this issue. Striving towards meritocracy doesn't require that we exist in a perfect and equal world. And if you insist that we have to get there before we can even try this, well, then we'll never truly get there. Humans will never be perfect. Humans will always have some form of bigotry or bias and in-group, out-group preferences. And all we can do is strive to eliminate them and strive to get to a more equal and fair world in terms of opportunity. And in my view, DEI initiatives don't take us closer to that. If anything, they compromise many of those fundamental American principles. What do you guys think? What did you think of this segment? Let me know in the comments below.